let me start with you with Web3 startups, and especially when you look at the MENA region, to what extent do you think that investor sentiment toward Web3 startups has been, going through some shifts in last year and maybe the year before, as we see some shifts in the overall regulatory environment for crypto assets?
So I think as investors, it's always important to separate crypto and Web3. Right? And I think crypto is its own animal and was regulated in Dubai early with VARA and has its ups and downs. And, as we've seen very recently, more and more ups and downs and encouragement and so on. Whereas when we think about Web3, it's not just crypto. There's a lot of the use cases of blockchain, of tokenization. I think as investors, we have to be very aware. Are we crypto investors, or are we investors that believe in this fundamental technology that is Web3, that is blockchain, where we can build real utilization?
And on the topic of Web3 and blockchain, what applications are you seeing in practice that we're seeing not only in the region, but also broadly as well?
There are so many. I think the region here in MENA has an opportunity to leapfrog. So there are many applications that are around the world have been built on Web 2, that all of a sudden a shift to Web 3 is a shift in human behavior, is a reinvestment in technology. Whereas here in the region, there are many things that haven't been built on Web 2. And so when we're building for the first time on Web 3 to the extent that that technology is actually useful. A great example is a company in the agri-tech space that we invested in recently called Malaxi, which enables farmers across emerging markets to connect with wholesalers of food. And so you end up in a world where historically there's many layers of middlemen, each one taking a little bit of the cut and each one taking more time to get fresh produce into the hands of the person who's going to eat it at the end. Whereas if you come in with a proper blockchain-enabled solution with smart contracts, replacing some of these middlemen, because ultimately they are the enablers of trust. So if you can find a technology that is cheaper, because now you don't have all these layers cut, farmers can make more money, wholesalers get the food cheaper. So you use smart contracts to replace that human layer of trust that has historically been there, and it gets things done faster, better, and it's a better outcome for both parties. So these are the solutions that we're seeing, these days being built on Web3 in the region.
And these solutions, to what extent do you think that certain sectors in the MENA region are going to take most benefit from them? When you look at decentralized technologies and Web3 technologies, do you focus on certain sectors that you see a great room for growth when it comes to using these technologies?
Our job as a VC is really to think through which industry 5 years from now is massively different to 5 years ago. That's how we define Series A investing. So companies have a little bit of revenue, they have the potential for growth, the industry has tailwind, and we take a look at a macro view and then a seed view, and where can tech really play a role in accelerating the adoption of these industries? And where that lies, Web3 enabled, is agri-tech. So anything related to food security, we still import 85% of our food here. So anything where that's going to either make that faster, better, or help us produce locally is helpful. And then supply chain technologies. So anything where we're fundamentally changing the supply chains of the world.
And that supports as well food security, which is something that we suffered from globally in 2020.
Yes, and they're all interrelated. And since we don't have the answers, and right now we're building for the first time these industries here, we can more easily use Web3 as an enabling technology than other places we're placing.
On the topic, obviously, you talk about agri-tech and supply chain. You wrote a book recently called Coming of Age, How Technology and Entrepreneurship Are Changing the Face of the Middle East. Great title.
Thank you.
From a Middle East perspective, when it comes to entrepreneurship, how do you see that being different from other parts of the world?
Well, we start with just the fundamental demographics. So we have 450 million people across MENA, half are under the age of 30. It is by far the youngest population in the world, alongside one or two other regions, but not behind. So you have the youngest population, you have 85% digital engagement, which is one of the highest in the world, probably because everyone's so young, right? And then you have the fastest adoption of technology, probably because everyone's so young. So we're not sitting with an average population of 50-something saying, we're used to doing it this way, why should we change? We're sitting with the average population of 20-something and saying, how do we grow? How do we do things? What's the coolest way to do it? And so that alone inspires this energy of entrepreneurship. And as you have this youth population entering the workforce, they're here to build, to create, and to use tech. They're not here just to maintain the way things have been done for many years.
To what extent do you think that regulations is a major hurdle for Web3 evolvement?
I don't think it's a hurdle for Web3 in the region, especially. I think that blockchain as an enabling technology and Web3 as an enabling technology is ubiquitous ultimately. And regulators say, great, if this works, it works, let's go. I think crypto in the region has gotten a head start. I think now other markets are looking to catch up. So I think of it as a really exciting technology. And I think in 10 years, we'll look back the same way that, now we look back at the internet and say, well, that was game changing. And this was the bubble and this was the bust. And here's the infrastructure that got left behind that we're using to really create a new economy.
One last question there. Obviously, you mentioned all the positive, half the population being under the age 30. I think that's very exciting. What is the one or two major risks you're watching for that could derail some of this optimism that we have in the region?
Well, I think that the region also has, as its biggest asset is its youth. One of the biggest challenges we have is the employment of the youth. So I think keeping enough hope and enough success stories and enough jobs and employment for these young people as they look to grow and build their own families and their own lives is probably the most important thing to keep in mind as we try to stay positive.
Thank you so much, Noor, for joining us at Crypto Weekly. That was Noor Sweid, founder, Global Ventures.
Are your children prepared for the future of money? Order Decoding Crypto with Henri and Hodler, the #1 new release kids book on Amazon.